see. So we're thinking, print this email.
Yeah.
And then let's see if what we'll do.
Yeah, I think it will be good.
I mean, I don't know if my technology is working for that. But let's see.
Your technology is working for you.
Maybe. It says it's warming up. Yeah. All right, so they want me to read. This is one of the things from your manifesto.
Yeah.
Make your own metrics. Invent your own rules, your own tools, your own platforms, your own algorithms. And if you can't, at least keep in mind that the most valuable things can never be counted. My response to that is, you don't have to invent your own rules, your own tools, and your own platforms, and your own algorithms. You don't have to. You just have to choose them consciously. I would say pick your own rules. You know, because what if your own tools, what if there's a great tool that someone else has? I'll just borrow their tool. You know, but I want to borrow it, right? I'm not going to accept the tools that are given to me without analyzing them, without understanding their affordances and their biases. You know, but I don't have to, you know, make my own computer, make my own TV.
Right.
But I can look at it and say, oh, this is not, I got a problem with this. Like I got a problem with that Macintosh, right? Because where are they getting the rare earth metals? What are they doing? What's the...
But you're still using.
I'm still using. I'm making a compromise, right?
Yeah.
So I could stop, you know, and that's part of it is, you know, I can drop out. I mean, I do think that too many of us spend too much time, energy, and technology on trying to scale whatever we do where we don't need to. You know, 99% of us don't need to be tweeting what we're doing. We could just do it. You know, it's harder if the internet doesn't know.
But you need the applause. No?
People think they do. But the problem is the applause that you get on these services, it doesn't even fill your heart. It's an addiction. It never fills the empty spot in your soul. So you go back and you go back and you go back. If it filled it, you would need to go back, right?
Yeah.
It's like you do cocaine, you go back.
I never try, but I imagine.
You would. The people go back and back and back because it doesn't really fill anything. You do DMT, you're like, okay, maybe next year. that was good. I'm glad I did that once in this lifetime. You know, I remember Rajneesh, the cult leader guy, but he had some good things. He had this giant cult, you know, in I think it was in Oregon somewhere. And there was a lot of sex that went on there. And then someone asked him about sex, and he said, like, well, if you do sex right, you only need to do it once a year. But I understand what he was saying. It's like if you have that big an orgasm, you're done. You're cooked. You know, so it's that way. With if you teach kids how to read in your neighborhood, if you take care of old people where you live and get them baths and bring them food, the feedback that you get live in the moment from that person, it means more to your body and psychology than 1 million likes on your Instagram post.
Yeah. This is interesting.
But yeah, but I agree. You know, the I'm more important than that you invent your own rules or that you invent your own tools. I'm more interested in that you own your tools. You know, it's this is the Marxist in me coming out. But I like when the worker owns the means of production. It's the way we think about our value. You know, it's funny because I'm reading Marx largely because my daughter has to do Marx for her 11th grade class. So I reread Marx, and he's so concerned with how people used to work like in a family, and you're working because you're thinking about how am I contributing to what other people need, and you get your sense of meaning and purpose is, am I fulfilling other people's needs? And the change that he's so upset about is when we're thinking in terms of how does my work, what's the exchange value of my work? what can I get for it? How much money can I get for this? You know, or I'm going to make a chair. I want to make a beautiful chair for someone else to sit in. And now they're not thinking that. I'm going to make a chair.
How much money?
How can I get off it? How much can I make? How much profit can I get off this chair?
Yeah.
And they're two very different approaches. You know, one is removed. And that, you know, when the internet started, it started as a way of restoring that family connection. I see you, share with you, you share with me. It's all shareware, open source, free.
This is how Facebook started. Don't you think?
In a way. But it was conceived by someone with a social disorder. So it had some problems to start.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, you could say he was looking for, was he looking for a way to make money? I think so.
I don't think in the beginning. Again, I don't know him.
Why would he steal the idea? Why would he steal it from the roommates rather than just do it with them? Because he wanted it for him, you know? And even getting credit for things and all that, that's still part of this same urge, you know, to rise above everyone else, to be alone rather than together. And that's the other problem is that's what you know, Timothy Leary used to tell me about this technology that I didn't believe, but that so many of the people using it and making it, they want to create a bubble around themselves. They want to recreate the womb. You know, they
And everybody used togetherness, but it's not anymore together, only through internet.
Yeah, and that's not, you know, I'm trying to spend less and less time on it rather than more. Should we look at this other one?
Yes, please.
Intro, meta, multi, micro, macro, pre, post, poly, hybrid. Give it a name if you must, but play with borders enough to enjoy something different while still feeling yourself. Well, I mean, I think you're talking about intimacy, you know, about social, intellectual, spiritual, moral, and technological intimacy. Playing with borders means you lose the sense of what's yours and what's mine. You know, there's a word called, what's it called? Proprioception. Proprioception is the word that means how do you understand where your body ends and where something else begins. And sometimes you can do weird little tricks where you take all your fingers and you move them around and then look, and then someone points and you have to figure out which finger they're pointing at, that you can't, or they touch it and it's like, oh, or you look at someone else's hand and you think it's your hand if it's in the right place. Like I put my hand back here and you put your arm through there, then you can touch it and I'll almost feel it. You know, that's proprioception. Is where all sort of optical illusions and different things you can go in make you feel like something else, like your body's in a different thing. And the internet and video games and 3D and virtual reality were always about, for me, about challenging where do I end and other people begin. Even social media to some extent and the early internet things were like, oh wow, are you here or am I there? Where are we when we're talking on the phone? What is that? You know, when I close my eyes and I'm in an old phone with a wire, you know, I'm talking to my lover on the phone. Where are we? You know, where's our body? So the net was so much about breaking down the boundaries of location and self and body and you and me. And, you know, it felt like the internet was very much like rave. You know, rave dancing, that is a great metaphor. Everybody taking ecstasy and dancing in this one, we're part of an organism together. You know, the early internet people thought that's what would go on. Contrast is the solution. Apparently, it's natural to avoid conflict. It's also wrong. What we need is better, smarter, kinder conflict that puts our differences to work to engineer models that suit everybody. I would agree that we are, in some sense, we're still at the end of the television media environment.
And still everybody is paying more to television than online.
Yeah. But television was about the global big blue marble. Television was globalist. And the globalist sensibility is, Rodney King said it. Why can't we all get along? Television is Oprah Winfrey. And come on, everybody. We could just have one big global hug. And, and the problem is people start to think that getting along is the prerequisite to negotiating a solution. That I have to like you, you have to like me for us to engage. No, it's about, we have to learn to feel responsible for people that we hate. Responsibility is different. I'm responsible for you, you're responsible for me. We disagree about everything, we don't like each other, but we have to be able to negotiate for, peaceful coexistence. And we've been so distracted by this false premise that we have to like each other that we can't do anything anymore. It is about difference. And if you look at the healthy societies of the past, Istanbul and Cairo and Lebanon, historically, back in the day, even in India, there were just, all the religions were there. And they would have these meetings where they would argue about like whose God is right and whose ethical system works.
Without killing each other.
Without killing each other, because it was
love of arguments today doesn't exist anymore.
No, and it's funny, we're either afraid to have conflict or we're entrenched in the conflict, but neither one is actually, to your other rule, neither one is crossing the border.
Or we have too many things to put on the table to test as guns and militaries, and we need to show off and need to use it in a way. So that's why we really...
Yeah, I mean, you could look at it that way. But the market value, the exchange value, back to Marx, the exchange value of your weapons goes up if you're living in a violent world. I'm not hopeful about the future of this civilization. It's funny. People were on one of the panels or something. I was even in the unfinished thing, I think it was, I was talking about, that's okay, civilizations go. And someone said, people always think it's the end of civilization. You can always look through history and people are always saying, oh no. And why would you think now would be any different? So why should it be now? And I said, oh, why do you think now is any different? Civilizations always end. The weird thing, the anomaly, would be if this thing continued on. They never continue on, particularly when they're.
But what do you think
like
is the journey or the path of what's going on now with the social media, with the education related with the young generation that are totally addicted to what's going on there, and as we talked earlier about the likes and the appreciation and so on, and actually also where the focus goes always is the negative comment, not the positivity in all this. And I'm very interested because for us this aspect of education or exposing the community to different things, totally different than what they have normally, it's very important. And for me it's important how you see this and how you actually try to educate your child regarding this.
I mean, it's hard, right? Because there's always more than one way of looking at it. In the early days, I liked to believe that the human nervous system can adapt faster than the companies can make technology. So if they're just like doctors are in an arms race against bacteria, and the bacteria almost always win because they change so fast, the tech companies are in an arms race against human consciousness. And I still have more faith in human consciousness and the human soul to adapt and evolve than I do these stupid tech companies to make an algorithm that can really
penetrate. Yeah.
Right, that really, really go. That said, we know as a fact now that the anatomy of young people's brains raised on social media is different. Their visual cortex gets bigger. Their frontal lobe with the executive function gets smaller. So the anatomy of their brain has been altered. There are people, me in the early 90s, or a guy like Mark Prensky today would say, things change. The ancient Greeks were upset about text, even writing things down, that it would screw up people's memory. We've been upset about each one, and we change as a result of each medium. Television, for all its problems, it did make us think more globally. And then we got global capitalism, of course, as a result. The internet, it connected us in certain ways, and then led to this surveillance capitalist, bad trip nightmare. But one could argue that kids are not worse; they're just different. They're thinking about things differently, and those differences eventually will surprise us as making them more effective, right? So you look at Greta, say, and you might say that, Greta with her Asperger's is somehow a victim of this internet programming which desensitizes you, and a lot of people are arguing that these technologies make us more Asperger-like. But at the same time, maybe you need someone with a social deficit in order to feel confident to break the Overton window of what's considered permissible speech. And she's saying stuff that people are afraid to say. She'll stand in front of, Davos and say, "You guys are fucked up. You're killing us all. Stop this."
But are we stopping?
No, we're not. We're not. But there are young people who seem, some of them, the digital environment is different. For all of its problems and the way it's being used by large corporations to fuck with our brains and to addict us and to sell us things. At the same time, television was a spectator democracy, something you watched as an audience member. It was a different medium. Digital makes people feel responsible individually. So there's problems with that, right? Because you get either you're responsible and I'm going to cancel you for this thing that you did 10 years ago. You used a funny word that now we don't like. So there's that responsibility. And on the other side, there's all the freedom, individual, personal sovereignty.
Freedom of speech is not anymore a thing.
Well, those guys, the blockchain-y guys who want personal power and individual sovereignty, all the whole Project Liberty is about your individual liberty on this blockchain to own your own thing. I don't want to own fucking anything, right? Own your data, own your thing. You are your IP, But both of them are those are sort of the bad side of individuality. But the good part of this individuality is the sense of personal responsibility and engagement. Not what do I want to watch, but what can I do? What's my part in this? What do I do? And that's the active part of interactive technology, or programming as a metaphor. Programming is not something I watch. Programming is something I do. How do I program the world I live in to function better? So there's a hands-on quality to digital technology that gives me some hope for this next generation You know, that we look, oh my God. It's almost like people my age and of my generation, they want to know, how should I think about this? I don't care how you think about this. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? We are all refugees. That they keep saying that in Torah. They keep trying to, at least to the Jews, they keep saying, the Israelites, I took you out of Egypt. I remember the time in the desert. You know, they always want you to remember, because there's so much of the planet is in the desert.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
escape from one slavery and not yet in the next place. You know, that's going to be probably the only major part of climate change that I'm going to see in my lifetime is a billion refugees. You know, Bangladesh has how long before it's underwater?
I don't know.
Not that long. And who's taking them? Right? Did Turkey say we're going to take them? Is Iraq going to take them? Who wants this 100 million people? Yeah, I mean, the problem is we're still stuck between... We really are still stuck between socialism and capitalism. And I don't know if either one works. You know, we know capitalism doesn't work. It leads to these extreme divisions of wealth, and everything becomes exchange value and all that. It doesn't work. But socialism, socialism at scale, that we can really organize and plan and figure it out, we don't seem to have that capability either. I feel like the only way to do this is locally. You know, we have to reorganize society around food basins. You know, where's the natural region of food and farming and schooling, and how do you do that?
Going back to our roots, actually. This is how we used to be.
Right. And food basin, they can be large. You could have several million people in a food basin, you know, and organize that, but not whole countries and whole planet. It's really hard. Wow, we are like...
Oh yeah, you have mascot?
Yeah, I guess. They're doing like little twins. No, I don't know what they are.
Yeah. No.
That's good. Put them on.
You coming next year, 2022.
2022.
Yeah.
Wow.
Promise.
I can't promise.
I knew it that
I
you were
can't.
going to promise.
We don't know. The world is delta, gamma, epsilon. We'll see.
Hi, it's Jerry Michalski, StoryThreading again, this time the session with Doug Rushkoff and Cristian Movilă, which you can see here in my brain. Cristian is one of the organizers of Unfinished. He is also a photographer, founder of the IDOS Foundation, and that's his Twitter account over there. And then Doug, I've actually known for a long time. Doug is a friend, and as you can see, has been really busy in the world. He is a fan of Marshall McLuhan. He teaches at the at the ITP at NYU, and he's so prolific a writer that I have a separate thought for Doug's books. Look, that is a lot of books to have published in one lifetime. In the book Present Shock, he actually mentions me and my brain, which is a fun self-referential little loop here. And when my wife read the page and a half that he had on in his book about me, she learned a lot about me, which I thought was really, really nice. So back to this session with Doug and Cristian. They went a lot of places, but they really focused a lot on social media and technology's effects on society. And this whole idea that the tech companies are in an arms race against human consciousness. How do we deal with this? This has something to do with Facebook and all other social media kind of eating our brains, Instagram's effects on young women, other things like that. But there was also this broader conversation about civilization. Civilizations always end. The kids today aren't worse, they're different. And there was this interesting piece that I think is a recurring theme also, and this is a recurring theme in kind of many conversations I'm involved in, which is we seem to be stuck between socialism and capitalism, and we don't know whether either of them works. This basically, I kind of generalize. I've got an active thought in my brain called the only alternatives to capitalism are communism or socialism, and they've both failed, which is a false dichotomy or a false dilemma. This is basically a way of setting up the questions so that the only viable alternative is capitalism, so we better suck up and stick with capitalism. You may also be aware of the acronym TINA, which is There Is No Alternative to the Neoliberal Agenda, made famous by Margaret Thatcher, Thatcherism, neoliberalism, and a whole bunch of other things like that. So for me, this is a false dichotomy, and when I head into this question, I wind up trying to figure out how are we going to renegotiate the social contract? Where are we heading? And the system is actually quite broken. I think that the current system is not serving us very well. And one of the big questions is, how will we actually get someplace really functional? So one of the places where I hold this thinking is in what is the next societal stack? And in fact, I have the thought, what are our next two stacks? And here I'm borrowing the notion from software of solution stacks. Some of you have heard of the LAMP stack, which means Linux, Apache. Here we go, the LAMP stack, just so you can see it explicitly. This is the Wikipedia page for the LAMP stack. The LAMP stack is a programming stack that says you have Linux as the operating system, Apache as the web server, MySQL as the database, and then one of the P languages, Perl, Python, PHP, as a programming language. And when you see an ad for a full stack developer, they mean somebody who's capable of dealing with all of these different layers which work nicely together to build all different kinds of websites and web services. Okay, so if you'll forgive the technology metaphor, I'm trying to figure out, I think that the social contract is up for involuntary renegotiation right now. Occupy, the Gilets Jaunes, the Arab Spring, cacerolazos in South America, Trump, the Trumpocalypse, all these things for me are evidence that the social contract is being renegotiated because people are fed up. They see a worse future for their kids than for themselves. And so at the social level, our current contract in the West is voting and democracy, which is becoming illiberal democracy. In fact, I can go to today's stacks, I can go to today's societal stack, and I've connected to all these things. So neoclassical economics, free markets, neoliberalism, the Washington Consensus. I've got a whole thought, the conservative capitalist point of view that says that scarcity is value, possessive individualism works great, tax cuts create jobs, and sort of trying to get people to the American dream, which has kind of turned out to be a destructive kind of model for how to work. So one of my active questions is, what is the next societal stack? Where are we going? And there's lots of interesting territory here. There are new forms of governance. People are working with cryptocurrencies. We are all over the place with theories and ideas and experiments about what the next societal stack is. And then under that, metaphorically, I'm also asking, what is the next organizational stack? Because the old corporation and nonprofit world is melting as well. For starters, C corporations in the US are fully for-profit corporations. There's a lot of inroads being made by B corporations or for-benefit corporations, a whole series of alternative corporate ownership. I list here more exotic forms of organization, including a whole variety of different co-op models. But a friend of mine is building something he calls Fair Shares Commons. There are lots and lots of experiments here, but I think we're moving into a new world where we're going to, 50 years from now, maybe less, we're going to have these two new stacks that may have bled into each other. They may not be separate. Nation states that are sort of the societal stack may blend into the crypto economy, and we may have something less than that. Anyway, this is a long digression, but it's a really juicy topic for me. It's a place where I've done a lot of thinking. I'm not an expert. I'm just an amateur on all these things. I'm kind of a dilettante who has this tool that he can store things in, that he can store articles in. So, here's an article called The Mutualist Economy, A New Deal for Ownership. And this is a link to the article. And it was written by Yakov Fagin and Nils Gilman. Nils Gilman's doing a lot of really interesting work in these territories. So let's go to him. He used to work at Monitor and GVN. He's a fan of deviant globalization. He's a historian. You see what I'm doing here. So now let's go back to, I have to backtrack a little bit here. Here is a link back to our conversation with Doug and Cristian. So They also talked about how we're afraid to have conflict, and there are a whole bunch of things that I can go into there, which I'll sort of wave a hand toward, because I think this story thread piece has gone long enough for right now. But for instance, political correctness, the battle against political correctness and wokeness, people's reticence to have arguments, people's excitement to have arguments, and the fact that a bunch of parties in the world have figured out that if you scream and shout, you get attention, if nothing else. There's a whole bunch of really interesting things around that. Finally, at the very beginning of the session, I think it's Doug who quotes Osho saying, if you do sex right, you only needed to do it once a year. Which I'm not sure sounds like wisdom, but I think it was said tongue-in-cheek. Again, Jerry Michalski here, Story Threading for Unfinished. Really excited about where the sessions are going, and I think you'll start to see more and more that Emma and I are going to weave the different stories into each other. So look for that as we go forward.